word has a power to it. It's versatile, albeit crude. It's an exclamation of love, lust, bewilderment, frustration, or hate. I want to fuck you. What the fuck? Or fuck off! For me, I'll always associate the word with my father, which is odd as I can count on one hand the occasions I can remember him using it. My father was born in 1935 in Tasmania and raised more by the Jesuits than by his own parents. My grandfather had gone off to World War II, a surveyor, helping to build airfields on islands captured in the South Pacific. And at the same time, my father was sent away to boarding school. He would next live at home full-time when he had made a home of his own. His parents had effectively fucked off. But I'm supposed to be telling you about the time my father used the word, not about how parents can fuck us up. Actually, the first fuck I can remember my father using wasn't said aloud at all. I was 6 or 7 years old, my sister a year younger. We were on the freeway driving to go on vacation when some driver did something that scared my father. I remember the car swerving, the honking of horns, and a moment of terror. My sister began to cry. I probably would have too if I hadn't been so my mind reeling. And that's when my dad gave the first fuck I remember. He rolled down his window, he stuck his arm out, and he raised his middle finger high. My sister, ever eager to please, immediately mimicked the act. And not wanting to be left out, I did the same. My mother was horrified. "Peter," she exclaimed. And my dad immediately explained that this was how you said thank you to other drivers. My mother would spend the next several hours telling us not to thank people. The next fuck I can remember my father using was 6 or 7 years later. It was Super Bowl, and for the first time in years, my dad was getting to see the entirety of the game. My father, both my parents really, were determined to not be the sort of parents he had had. My father was going to be a dad. He was going to be involved in my sister's and my life. Thus it was, from each September to the following spring, every Sunday he was out coaching my sister's soccer team. But this weekend the skies had unleashed a torrent of rain, and all the fields were closed. Now, Dad wouldn't have complained if he'd been out coaching, but it was clear that he was going to enjoy the football game he got to see instead. And that's when the doorbell rang. My father went to answer it, one eye still on the TV. It was the Jehovah's Witnesses. As they launched into their spiel, my dad cut in. He explained that it was Super Bowl, why he was watching it, and how long it had been since he'd last seen it. I think he expected them to say, "Great, enjoy the game." Instead, one said, "You think a mere game is more important than your immortal soul?" Which is when it happened. Fuck off! Slam! I couldn't believe it. I felt the door slam as much as I heard it. I wasn't naive. Oh, Dad came back into the room and took a seat. I wasn't naive. I'd heard the word at school. I'd even experimented with it myself. But I had never expected to hear my dad say it. And while I would never have uttered it aloud in front of him, all I could think was, "Fucking wow!" The next fucks I'd hear my father use wouldn't be until I was 18. It was early December of 1988, my birthday only a few days off. Dad was dying at this point, cancer, and had been for 2 years. We didn't know how much time he had left, but I did know this would be our last Christmas together. It was Saturday, and my dad and his best friend were decorating for the company Christmas party. I'd been dragged along to help, voluntold. Reluctantly at first, but soon less so. Dad let me have a beer. While I was no angel and had certainly enjoyed my share of beer in the past, this was the first one I'd had with my dad. And the profanity flew between the two friends. Fuck this, fuck that, and can you fucking believe it? The more they cursed, the more their accents came out. My father's Australian, his best friend's Scottish. Swearing has always seemed more dignified to me when it's accented. But they weren't mindlessly swearing. Where before my father was careful not to utter his fucks in front of me, now it was time for me to grow up. To get treated like a man, even if I weren't truly one yet. And when my father told me to get fucked after I made some joke, I knew he was really saying, I love you. At some point, my father left to run some errand. And as he went to walk out of the room, his shoulders slumped. I realized he was again in pain, that nausea from the chemo was hitting him, and that the errand was as much to prevent his friend and I having to see that as because it needed to be run. Fuck. I said the word and felt the full weight of it for the first time. My father would live another 11 months. 28 years later, I still miss him. Fuck.